Hello again. Hope you're doing well. I'm Hardleg Joe, if you didn't know, and today I'm going to be talking about business ownership. If you're new to the channel, I previously made a series of videos on economic democracy, where I talked at length about private businesses and explained why I think we should democratize them. Now, in those videos, I often spoke negatively about business owners, comparing them to the nobility of medieval Europe, which seemed to confuse some people in the comments. Because I think most of us associate the word nobility with inherited wealth. Nobles are born rich and powerful. Their authority comes from their bloodline, not from any skill or talent on their part. Meanwhile, the common perception of a business owner tends to be the opposite of that. Most people hear that term and think of an entrepreneur, someone who starts their own business and earns their wealth through hard work and smart decision-making. That notion of what it means to be a business owner, though, is a stereotype. It doesn't really match reality. I mean, don't get me wrong, entrepreneurs do exist. In fact, there's quite a lot of them in this country. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses, owned and operated by entrepreneurs who are probably very hardworking people. The thing is, though, none of them are really significant in the grand scheme of things. Because you see, even though only 0.1% of all businesses could be considered big businesses, that tiny, tiny minority employs 55% of the country. At least. That number should actually be higher, but the way that America defines a small business isn't very accurate. Like, technically, I'm a small business. I'm a full-time YouTuber, which certainly feels like being an entrepreneur. I mean, I decide what videos to make, I do all the production work myself, and I set my own hours. I'm doing this all on my own, as long as you ignore the fact that I'm posting this exclusively on YouTube, a platform owned and operated by Google, which is a multinational billion-dollar company that takes 45% of my ad revenue. I mean, I have a lot of freedom at this job, but that doesn't change the fact that what I'm doing is making content for one of the world's largest companies. They sign my checks. I have to follow their rules. For all practical purposes, I am an employee of Google. Every YouTuber is. And every Twitch streamer essentially works for Amazon, even if the law considers them small business owners. This same notion can be found outside the entertainment industry as well, with anyone who operates a franchise. There are people who own a single McDonald's, or a UPS store, or a Hilton hotel, and they count as small business owners, even though large portions of their profits are being funneled into massive corporations. Likewise, there's a lot of people out there who are legally classified as gig workers or independent contractors. Technically, they're not employed by any one company. They're free to work for anyone. But in practice, they often end up working for the same one or two companies, which effectively makes them employees in all but name. My point is, if you take all of that into account, the percentage of people working for big businesses is much larger than 55%. Which means truly independent entrepreneurs are not only rare, they're kind of insignificant. I mean, no disrespect to any small business owners out there, but the fact is, they simply don't have an impact on the wider world. Most of us work for a big business. So when I talk about business owners, that is who I'm referring to. The hardworking gal who runs the coffee shop on the corner, the old man who operates your local game store, they may technically own businesses, but what they do is so different from the massive society-shaping corporations that employ most people that I don't even consider them to be in the same category. So for the sake of this channel and these videos, I'm going to be referring to small business owners as entrepreneurs from now on. The term business owner will be reserved exclusively for the owners of big businesses. The wealthy investors that own Starbucks. The millionaire stockholders of Activision Blizzard. They are the ones having a negative impact on the world. They are the ones that I'm comparing to nobles. And they are nothing at all like the hardworking entrepreneurs out there that you think of when you hear the words business owner. In most cases, the owners aren't even individual people. They are investment firms, utilizing their clients' generational wealth in order to become collective shareholders in numerous industries. Which brings us to the educational part of this video, because unless you studied economics, you probably don't know exactly what all of that means. And even if you do, you might not necessarily understand the implications this has for the wider economy. So let's do some Economics 101 real quick, just get everyone on the same page. To start with, I should clarify that for the purposes of this video, a share and a stock are the same thing. A shareholder is a stockholder. If you buy stock, you own shares, and vice versa. There is technically a difference between the two, but it's mostly a grammatical thing that only economists seem to care about, so I'm just going to be using them interchangeably. Anyway, shares are a way to split ownership of a company. For the sake of an example, let's say that 10 friends decide to pool their resources and start a business together. That way they can share the workload and the risk between all of them. Now they all plan to do an equal amount of work, so they split the company into 10 equal parts. Each part is one share, which in this case represents 10% ownership of the total company. If each friend gets one share, then they are all equal shareholders. Sounds simple enough so far, but what does that mean in a practical sense? Like, what can you actually do with 10% of a company? Well, most of the time, stocks offer two benefits to the people who hold them. First, stockholders get to vote on how a company is run. Usually, the more stocks you own, the more voting power you have. So, if you own a majority of the stock in a company, you effectively control that company and can run it however you want. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, stockholders usually get a share of the company's profits. Every few months, the business will calculate how much money it's made, and then divide a portion of that equally amongst all the shareholders. Again, the more stocks you have, the more you get paid. These payments are called dividends, and they are a large reason why shares are so valuable in the first place. As long as a company makes money, the shareholders get a percentage of that money, which means owning shares in a big, successful corporation can generate a steady source of income for years. Now, so far, all of this seems well and good. In fact, it sounds a lot like the kind of economic democracy that I praised in my previous videos. The major flaw in this system is that businesses, and thus shares of those businesses, are considered property, like a house or a chair. Once you own it for life. Or at least until you sell it or give it to someone else. To see why that can cause problems, let's go back to our example of the 10 friends. Like, at first, it makes perfect sense. If a group of people start a company together and they all work towards making it run successfully, then it's only logical that they should all have a say in how things are run and a share of that company's profits. Where the system breaks down is time. Because what happens when one of those friends retires? I mean, it'll happen eventually. We all grow old. At some point, the founders will be too old to continue working. They will have to hire someone who can run the company in their place. Except, when that happens, they don't have to transfer their stock to their replacements. They get to keep them. Because again, stocks are property. They belong to the person, not the company. Which means the original shareholders can now continue to rake in profits from a company that they no longer work for. And maybe you think that's fine, because, you know, they started the company. It only exists because of them, so perhaps in your eyes they've earned the right to just chill out on a beach somewhere while other people work for them. Alright, I mean, that doesn't sound fair to me, but I'll go with it for now. Does that same reasoning hold true for their kids? Or their grandkids? How about their great-grandkids? Do they deserve to rake in profits from a company they don't work at, from a company their ancestors started? Because when the founders eventually die, their property, including all their stocks, will be passed on to their children and their children's children after that. Ford, Boeing, Disney, Johnson & Johnson. These are some of the biggest companies in the world right now. And also the names of men who died long, long ago. Men whose shares have been passed down to their descendants. The passage of time has placed billion-dollar businesses in the hands of people who have never worked for those businesses. People who weren't even born when they were started. They have nothing to do with the success of the company, but they receive a cut of the profits regardless. That is how we get generational wealth in the modern day. That is the new nobility. Once more, we have people who are rich and powerful, not because they worked hard, but simply because they were born into it, because they inherited wealth from their family. Now, so far it may seem like the problem we have here is with inheritance, not with private business ownership. But that's because we don't have the full picture yet. There's still two other factors at play here, but in order to understand them, we need to go back to our example. There's something I oversimplified earlier that needs to be expanded on. You see, normally when 10 people start a business, they don't just make 10 shares. They make 10 million shares. That's actually the standard number for a startup company. So in the case of our example, each friend would not possess 1 share, but 1 million shares. They still each own 10% of the company, it's just divided into a lot more pieces. Why so many? Well, let's say that the friends want to build a factory for their business, but they don't want to take out a loan to do it. What they can do instead is sell a small percentage of their shares on the stock market. If each friend sells 10,000 shares for, let's say, $10 a piece, then they can make $1 million for their factory while still owning 90% of their company. The more shares you have, the more you can sell, while still controlling most of the voting rights. That's why companies break themselves into 10 million parts. It's a tactic to raise money without having to actually do much of anything. Now again, this seems like a decent idea at first glance. Selling stock is an easy way for smaller companies to raise the money they need to expand and grow. However, the mere fact that people can buy stocks, the fact that we have a stock market, just contributes to our nobility problem. Because we've created a system where anyone who has the money to purchase stocks can now rake in profits from companies they don't work for. Essentially, it is a system that allows the rich to get richer without doing any work. Now, some people will defend the stock market by saying that there's risk involved. After all, if you buy stock in a company and that company goes out of business, then all your stocks are worthless. You've just lost a bunch of money because they're never going to pay any dividends. There's this idea that the people who own stocks are earning their money, because if they're not smart with their investments, then they'll end up losing everything. And you know, that might be debatable, if not for the third and final part of this puzzle. So far in this video, I've treated stockholders as if they were individuals. Because that's how a lot of people picture the stock market, as a bunch of lone traders buying and selling to each other. The reality of the situation, though, is that nearly 80% of all stocks are owned by companies, not by people. Specifically, most stocks are owned by investment firms, which are businesses that make money by investing other people's money, usually in the stock market. Their business model is essentially to approach wealthy people and say, hey, we know the stock market really well. Give us $1 million and we'll invest it for you. In a year's time, we'll turn your $1 million into $2 million, take a little cut for ourselves, and give you back more than you gave us. If you're rich, it sounds like free money. Because in most cases, it is. There are some high-risk investment firms, but the vast majority of them always make a profit. Because the way they're set up, they cannot lose. Think of it this way. If you wanted to buy stock, there would be risk involved. You could only really afford to invest in a handful of companies at most, and if those companies don't do well, you're not earning your money back. But most investment firms will pool their clients' money together into one massive fund, and then use that to purchase a lot of stock. We're talking billions of dollars in most cases. With that much money, they don't have to take risks, because they can afford to invest in every facet of the economy. Which of the major food manufacturers are going to be the most profitable this year? Doesn't matter. The firms will just buy shares in every major food company, and then it doesn't matter who wins, they win. As long as people are buying food, the firms will make a profit. And that's just the beginning. They don't only buy shares in the food companies, they buy shares in the supermarkets that sell the food, in the shipping companies that deliver that food to the stores, in the gas companies that fuel the delivery trucks, in the oil companies that extract the fuel from the earth, in the construction companies that build the oil rigs. By using the collective wealth of their millionaire clients, investment firms can invest in every step of the supply chain, so that any time money changes hands for any reason, they get a cut of it. Which means they have effectively eliminated risk from investing. As long as the economy in general is doing well, they will make money. Which in turn means that people no longer have to be intelligent to invest in the stock market. All they need to succeed is to be rich enough to give their money to an investment firm, to have that $1 million that they can part with. And because of generational wealth, there's a lot of people who were born rich enough to do that, despite never working a day in their lives. And believe it or not, that isn't even the worst part about this. Remember that this video is about business owners, so let's think for a moment. In this situation we have here, who actually owns the big businesses? The answer is other big businesses. What we have here is not an economy with individual people making rational decisions. What we have is a money machine. A system of interlocking companies and regulations that work together almost automatically to create a very specific outcome. Namely, the generation of more wealth for people who are already wealthy. Now that you understand that, let's take a step back and really look at the repercussions of that system. The businesses that employ most of us are owned by a series of investment firms. These firms only exist to generate money for their clients. The firms are the ones who actually possess the stock, which means they are the ones who have voting rights in most of the world's largest and most powerful companies. So when those companies have a shareholders meeting, when they get down and try to decide their business strategy, what ends up happening is that the representatives of several investment firms will show up and tell the management to make more money now. Because that's all that they care about. Profits. Short-term profits, to be exact. They need the money in a year, 5 years at most. To them, companies are just a means to an end. The products those companies make, their employees, the environment, safety, ethics, even the long-term success of the company itself are all secondary to making their investment back within the short time frame allotted. That is the only reason they bought stock, and they are singularly focused on it. This is why so many businesses act immorally and short-sightedly. Because there aren't people at the helm. These days, most CEOs and managers running the big companies are not the owners, they're merely business school graduates who have been hired by the shareholders to run the company. And if they don't run things as profitably as possible, if they don't get quick results by any means necessary, then the shareholders will fire them and find someone who will. The end result of all of this is an economy full of inefficient and volatile industries that are more focused on making money than providing the services they were built to provide. Modern food companies are not run by people who care about feeding others. They're run by businesses that want to make money. Hospitals are no longer optimized to treat the maximum number of patients, but instead to earn maximum profits. And construction companies are more concerned with building mansions for millionaires and rental properties for landlords than building regular houses that normal people can afford. That's the fastest way for them to make their money back. And as a result, we live in a world where people starve, go homeless, and die of curable diseases, not because we don't have the resources to save them, but because we're using those resources to make money instead of saving them. To put it simply, a safe and stable society where everyone can get what they need is not profitable, which means our current economic system will never produce such a society. It is not designed to do that. It will always divert resources from those who need them most in order to make wealthy people more wealthy. And even if that doesn't bother you on a moral level, even if you don't care about the injustice of a system that arbitrarily impoverishes some people while allowing others to live comfortably, you have to realize that from a practical standpoint, this is not sustainable. Our current system is designed to generate infinite wealth in a world that is decidedly not infinite. Eventually, it will squeeze every ounce of profit from every industry possible. Eventually, all the non-renewable resources will be tapped, and when that happens, the economy will no longer be capable of growth. So even if you're one of the rich people benefiting from this system, you have to realize that it can't last forever. And more importantly, that we're nearing the breaking point. If we keep going on like this, if we don't make drastic changes soon, the entire system will collapse within our lifetime. And when it does, it'll take all of your wealth along with it. And most of civilized society as well. One way or another, you will fall from your lofty position. The only question is, will that fall be an unexpected plummet onto concrete, or a carefully calculated drop into a safety net? The fact of the matter is, a global economic collapse would be bad for everyone. If you want to avoid that, then we need to change our system into one that is stable and sustainable. A system designed to fill the needs of the many and not the pockets of the few. It doesn't matter who you are, it is in your best interest to work towards that goal. And the first step towards reaching that goal is removing private business ownership. If we look back at the big picture, I think it's clear that our problem is one of detachment or alienation. The big businesses are run so poorly because the people who actually own them are 3 steps removed from that process. We have investors that own businesses through other businesses without understanding what any of those businesses do or even which ones they own. The wealthy have turned our industries into cash machines precisely because those industries are seen as personal property, as tools that the owners have to make money for themselves. No amount of regulation can fix that fundamental flaw. As long as businesses are seen as property, as long as they have owners, those owners will find a way to leverage their property to their advantage. We could outlaw investment firms, regulate the stock market better, even abolish inheritance. But that would just slow the business owners down, stall them until they found some other way to trade property for power. The only solution is democratization. Turn our companies into institutions that have no owners, that are owned by the people. Have them prioritize excellent products and quality service over making profits. And put them in the hands of the employees who actually work there, the people on the ground who know that industry inside and out. It won't be perfect. It won't fix all our problems. I don't think anything will, and I'm not going to promise you that. But it has to be leagues better than what we have now, which is a literal money machine programmed only to seek profits at the expense of all other things. But I digress. At this point, I'm just repeating elements from my previous videos on economic democracy. If you haven't watched those yet and you'd like to learn more about it and how I think we can implement it, you can check out the playlist linked below. Otherwise, I think I'm going to call it here for now. Hopefully, you learned a little something about the economy and the stock market, even if you don't agree with me on how we should change those things. As always, if you have any questions or you'd like to discuss things, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. I do read and respond to most of them. And if you want to be notified of when the next video goes live, be sure to click that subscribe button, but I don't have to tell you that. Regardless, thank you all for watching, and until next time, stay safe out there.